The night skies of Sector 12 shimmered with twin moons, painting the dusty streets of the alien outpost town in pale blue light. From a distance, the settlement looked alive. Glowing signs, laughter spilling from cantinas, the scent of plasma-grilled meat drifting through the metallic air. But for Lira, standing in the shadows by the food stalls, that world was a place she didn't belong. She was large, by both human and Zethran standards. Her lavender skin stretched over soft curves that made movement clumsy. Her eyes, a shade of gray-blue, rarely met anyone's gaze. For most of her 20 cycles, she'd been laughed at, ignored or pitted. No one wanted the obese alien girl, who couldn't pass a physical test or fit into the sleek armor of her race's warriors. Tonight, hunger gnawed at her belly louder than the laughter that followed her wherever she went. She clutched the strap of her worn satchel and glanced toward the human trading post across the square. Brenner's Salvage and Repairs. A human shop in alien territory. Rumor said the owner was kind. Or maybe just desperate enough to hire anyone. Taking a trembling breath, Lira approached the door. Her reflection in the steel window made her heart sink. Her round face, the faint shimmer of sweat on her forehead, the torn hem of her jumpsuit. She wanted to turn away. But she'd done that her whole life. She pushed open the door. Inside, the smell of machine oil and ozone filled the air. Shelves of rusted parts lined the walls. Behind a cluttered counter stood a tall human man. His sleeves rolled up, arms marked with grease. He looked up from his datapad, eyes narrowing slightly before softening. "You lost, miss?" he asked in a voice rough but calm. No," Lira stammered. I was wondering if you needed help here." The man blinked. "You want a job? Here?" She nodded quickly, clutching her satchel tighter. "I can clean, sort things. I learn fast. Her voice cracked. "I just need a chance." He studied her, his gaze steady but not cruel. After a pause, he set down his datapad. "Name's Jalen Brenner. You any good with tools?" "Not really," she admitted. "But I can lift heavy things." A slow smile spread across his face. "That's better than half the recruits I get." "All right, Lira. I'll give you a trial day. No promises after that." Lira's breath caught. Really? Yeah. But you'll have to start now. There's a pile of scrap in the back that needs sorting." Her hands trembled, but this time not from fear. "Yes, sir." The hours passed quietly. Lira worked with careful focus, her large hands moving surprisingly gently as she organized broken circuits, gears and steel. Sweat glistened on her forehead, but she didn't stop. For once, no one was laughing at her. Jalen watched from the counter, occasionally glancing up from his work. There was something about the way she hummed softly while she worked, hesitant at first, then steady, almost soothing. When the clock chimed closing hour, Lira turned, afraid he'd tell her to leave. Instead he said, "You did good, Lira. Didn't think I'd see the floor of that storage room again." She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Good. Yeah," he chuckled. "You've earned a meal at least." He tossed her a wrapped sandwich from the counter. She caught it awkwardly, eyes wide. "For me." "Who else?" he said. "Eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in a while." Lira lowered her gaze, voice trembling. "No one's ever said that before." Jalen frowned. "Said what?" "That I did good." Something tightened in his chest. He didn't know what her story was, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Not just physical, but from years of being unseen. "Then you've been around the wrong people," he said quietly. Days turned into weeks. Lira became a constant in the shop. Quiet, diligent, dependable. She learned how to weld, how to identify rare alloys, and even how to tune plasma engines. Customers who once mocked her size began asking for her help when Jalen was away. But not everyone liked it. One evening, a group of Zethran traders entered, their laughter loud and cruel. One of them, tall and lean, smirked when he saw Lira behind the counter. "Well, if it isn't the great Lira," he sneered. "Didn't think you'd sink this low, working for a human?" The others laughed. Lira froze, her hands trembling. Old shame rose like a wave. Jalen stepped forward, his voice steady but cold. "You here to buy something or just hear yourselves talk?" The trader sneered. "We're here to see how much pity costs these days." Before Jalen could respond, Lira spoke softly but firmly. "Pity isn't what he gave me. He gave me work. And I earned it." The laughter stopped. The traders stared at her, surprised by the steel in her tone. Jalen folded his arms. "You heard her. Now leave." The group muttered curses but backed off, exiting into the night. When they were gone, Lira sank onto a stool, breathing hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have spoken." Jalen knelt beside her. "No, Lira. Should've. That was brave." Her lips quivered into a small smile. "Brave me." "Yeah," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." A month later, the annual Repair Expo came to Sector 12, a gathering of engineers, traders, and inventors. Jalen entered his newest prototype, an energy stabilizer designed by him and refined by Lira. As they presented it on stage, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some recognized her, the once mocked, overweight alien girl. When the machine powered up flawlessly, a hush fell. Then applause. Real genuine applause. Lira's eyes glistened as she looked at Jalen. "They're clapping for me?" "For us," he said, grinning. "Couldn't have done it without you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would." Jalen placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't need me to see you, Lira. You just needed a place to shine." That night, as the twin moons rose over the outpost again, Lira stood outside the shop, feeling the wind brush against her face. She was still the same girl, large, awkward, soft-spoken, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't hiding in the shadows. She was part of something. She had purpose. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't unwanted after all. A faint hum filled the air as the lights of Brenner's salvage and repairs flickered on behind her. Jalen's voice called from inside, warm and familiar. "Hey, partner, you coming? We've got work to do." Lira smiled, her heart full. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm coming." And she stepped into the light. The night air was cool when the expo lights finally dimmed. Lira and Jalen walked back to the shop, silent at first, the weight of the evening still settling between them. In her hands, Lira held the silver plaque they'd been awarded for innovation. It gleamed softly under the twin moons, a symbol of everything she thought she'd never have: respect, recognition, belonging. When they reached the shop, Jalen turned to her. "You know," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "when you first came in, I didn't think you'd last a day." Lira smiled shyly. "Neither did I." He chuckled. "Guess we were both wrong." She looked around the workshop, the glowing panels, the hum of engines, the faint smell of metal and warmth. It wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was home. "I used to think my size made me useless," she admitted softly. "That I didn't deserve to be anywhere. But today, for the first time, I didn't feel small.